All right, welcome to the Pottery Project Part 2. In this tutorial, we'll cover basically the conclusion of the project. So you can create interesting, cool textures like this that I'm going to share how to create on these objects. And you can add materials also, just straight up materials, and use the material presets. Those are kind of fun too. In order to see any kind of textures and materials though, we are going to work with Arnold materials. And so we'll need Arnold lighting here. And so there's just some options in here. We'll need to create a light of some sort. And in here, I have created this area light here. And if I hit, you can see how far back it is. I've really scaled it up. And I have a few options here. Exposure set to 22. And I have 3 samples applied. So if I select these guys and hit the F key to frame in on them again, I'll just show you how to create a light real quick. If you go to the Create menu, go down to Lights, and then you can choose the directional light. That's the one I created, and then bring it up. Or actually, no, I didn't. I created the area light. That's right. You could do a directional light though too if you wanted to. But let's go create lights, and it's area light, which is this one here. And then I can scale it up just by basically click on the scale key and then scale in the center. It has a direction. You can see this little, it looks like a rectangle with a little needle coming out from the center there. If I move it up here. So this is essentially the light direction here, right? So if I move it and then kind of rotate it by using the rotation tool here, you'll see here, this is the area that I'll create. So let me turn off this one temporarily. I will just type in in the channel box here, visibility. I'll type in a 0, and then we'll just work off this light here. So I'll click on the render, and you can see I've got no lighting essentially, and that's because of the intensity of it and how small it is, right? So if I scale it up quite a bit and then go into the attribute editor and change some of the values in here to make it, more intense, basically is what you need to do. So in here, I can crank up the intensity. I could change this to linear or quadratic for the decay rate. I think I'm going to increase this to 22. And let's try another render and see what happens here. You can start to see I'm starting to get some light here. So, just basically have to crank up the values more and more and more here, right? So that this simple area light here, I can type in whatever value I want. If I want to, I can uncheck this normalize and render it, and you'll see that there's not much of a difference there. Let's see. Let's go to like 400. Click render. Now we're starting to get some illumination, right? So just comparing that light versus this light, you can see here, this is an Arnold light shape versus a standard light shape. So I am going to bring back that one. If I click on it and go to the channel box here, I can come in here and type in a 1 here. So now it's turned back on, and I'll delete this guy. So in order to create the Arnold light, you'd have to go to the Arnold tab here, and there is some examples here of different lights. So here's one you can grab, and that's the same area light that I was basically doing. And so if I click on the attribute editor, you can see the same options here. So here's where I cranked up the exposure to 22, and I set the samples to 3. And then I just cranked up the size of this and brought it back a little bit. And if I hit render, it's going to blow it out. It's going to be way too bright because there's 2 lights right now on. So let me select area light 1 again in the channel box and turn that one off, and then click render real quick. And you can see it's a little bit better, but it's very, very bright because of how close it is to this object. Again, I brought it way back I was illuminating the entire scene. So that's basically how you create a light. I'll go ahead and delete this one and bring back my area light 1 just so you can, see the difference here. And I'll kind of zoom in a little bit and click on the render. So I am rendering at the lowest resolution, which is the 540. So again, for the render settings, if you click on the little clapper, this little gear icon, it gives you the render settings options. And right now it's set to HD 540, so nothing special there. And so I can just click on the second clapper to render out the frame in here, right? And if I want to actually find a actual render that I like, you know, in terms of the composition and everything, I can click on these two guys, and that will give me the actual renderable area. So I can zoom in here, kind of get you know, a nice angle that I like, and then click on that clapper again, and you'll see a better result essentially with this. But you can see it's still very low res. It's not, you know, super high res or anything. So if you want to add more detail, add more resolution, you would maybe draw a plane on the ground, and then of course have many more of these, right, in your image. But let's go over the basics now of how to create a material, and then which you've seen before, and how to add a texture. So to add a material, all you gotta do is select the material or the object you want to add a material to, and then right click on it and go down to assign new material. Once you do that, it pops up the new material tab, and you can click on the Arnold shader. And again, the default one that's really great is the AI standard surface shader. So I'll click on that. And in here, you'll see here it is here on the far right in our attribute editor. And I could give it a name. I can change the color if I want to change the color to some other crazy color, like green, for example. But I can also go to these presets, right? So the presets will allow you to change it to like a diamond or something like that, or ceramic or honey or gold or so forth. I am going to leave this at the default settings. I'm not going to change anything. I'm not going to use a preset because I want to add a texture to this. And I'm going to show you how to add textures to your objects, okay? Textures work a little bit different. They're two-dimensional flat images that you actually apply to a three-dimensional object. Versus the materials, which are essentially parameters, little sliders that you change that affect the metalness, the roughness, the specular, and so forth of the object. So let's go to a site here that's good for some textures, free textures. TextureKing.com I recommend. They're really awesome. They're open source textures. And I'm going to click on a category here, maybe Rust. I'm going to take a look at some of these Rust textures. I wanted something kind of bumpy and gnarly looking. This one looks kind of cool. So all you got to do is click on an object, one of these textures that you like. You click the download button, or you can simply click on it, and then that'll maximize the view of the texture. And then you can simply right click on it and choose Save Image As. Now, the important part is where to save your textures, okay? So you need to save them. You know, if you download textures, they'll be in the download folder, right? In your folder here. But the project structure is very important. So where we're going to save them is this thing called source images. And I'll save this in here, and I'll show you where that's at, right? So in our documents folder, we have the Maya icon. So if you double click on that, you have a folder called projects. And this is all your projects you have created. So you're going to want to create a new project called Pottery Project if you haven't done that in the first tutorial. And then, but if you did save it from the previous one, the Maze project, I'm assuming you could use that one and go into the source images in that one. But I have created a Pottery Project folder, so I'll double click on it. And then in here, remember, it's not the images folder. Images is what you render. It's the source images. So if you double click in there, these are the textures, right? That's how Maya uses these. So this is where you're going to drag them in here, okay? So once you have them in here, you're good to go. So let's go ahead, and I have the object selected. So my attribute editor is open, which again is this tab here on the right. You don't have it open. And it's the sky over here on the far left. If you have multiple little tabs here, if your history is not deleted, you may want to delete your history of your object just by going to Edit, Delete by Type, and choosing History. Once you do that, it'll kind of clean up any history here, and you'll be able to access your surface very, very quickly. Now I could rename this. I'll rename this Rust. I could have named it Rust Material or something, but I'll just leave it as Rust to make it a little bit easier to find. And then all I have to do is in here, I want to change two parameters. I could change several parameters, but I'm going to change the color of it, which is the color of the texture, essentially. I want to replace that. So right now, if I click in here, I could pick a color, right? Remember how you did that with the green? But I can click on this little checkerboard icon here. And what that does is that opens up the node editor. And what I can do in here is create a file link to the texture. So essentially what I'm going to do. So I'm going to, on the right here, I'm going to choose, add these options. There's one that says File. It's the fourth one down. I'm going to click on that, and that creates a file node. And you can see here it says Place 2D Texture and File. So I can click on the file and then click on this little folder icon here. and open up, and it will automatically go to the source images, which is what we're on. And here's that crazy cool rest texture. So I'm going to click on it and click open. Now, I am seeing that rest texture here. If you are not seeing that in your scene, you may be in a different form. So if you are, for example, if you have 4 or 5 as a number is shaded solid, but you need to be in 6, so number 6, which is showing the texture. And it's this little icon here, this little sphere with a texture. If you don't have that on there connected, you can see how if I turn on or off, that shows the texture there. Now, you may notice this one seems like it has some other thing going on for it, and this one's a little bit smoother, especially when I remove the geometry here, you can kind of see it. This one just has a little more bumpier quality, and it is literally called a bump. So if I select this material again, here it is, the rest. We're going to go down into an area that is known as geometry. So I can click on this little twirl out menu, and we're going to go to the bump mapping node. And again, you have a checkerboard little box here. I'm going to click on that, and it opens up the node editor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the file node again. So you've seen this before. This time there's 2 tabs. There's bump node and a file node. So I'm going to click on the file, click on the folder icon again, and click on that same rust texture, which is this one, and click open. Now you can see how crazy the bump is there. And that is due to this strength here, this bump value. If you slide left or right, you can get kind of a negative or positive image of the value. And you can be a little more subtle about it. So maybe like 0.69 looks okay there. 0.629. Let's go ahead and render this and see what it looks like. And again, you have to understand that this is very low resolution that we are rendering these textures at. So this isn't high res. And even at low res, they look pretty good. It is, wrapping around okay on here. What you may notice with these textures based upon the revolve tool is you might see seams. Like this one, you can clearly see a seam on here. And sometimes you can change the direction of that seam. So I can select this guy and go to the material here. And I'm going to go down to the color node here, and I'm going to click on this little arrow to navigate to the place texture here. And in here, what I can do is I can try and see if different ways of showing the texture might help. So I can try the mirror U. I can try a stagger. Let's see. I can try rotating the UV. Here we go. So by doing this, I get all of a sudden a better, possibly a better object of that, selection of the texture. You can also rotate the frame, which also kind of does it too. So you kind of play around with these settings here and see, what looks better to get rid of some of that seam quality. You might not get rid of it all completely, but like even that is looking a lot better in terms of the seam quality. So again, let's do a quick little render here. Take a look. Yeah, I mean, there's still some seam quality there, but it looks pretty good overall. I could rotate the object out of view and also get rid of that seam. So I could just select the object, hit the E for rotation, and kind of rotate away. And along here, I wouldn't see that seam line as much. So when I render it, it'd be much better. So what you want to do now is essentially say you have materials on a lot of these and textures. You can then render them at higher resolution. Now, the first thing you can do is you can change the geometry by hitting the 3 key if they are polygon geometry. Now, these are not polygons right now. These are NURBS geometry, and they look okay. So I'm not that dissatisfied or anything with it, especially if I zoom out like this and do a render, because you got to realize I'm going to have 100 of these. That's not too bad. It shows up the detail quite nice actually there at that level. So if I had 100 of these set up, maybe I would want if I click on the poly modeling shelf, add a plane and scale it up. Let's scale it up plane here and just kind of fit it in here. Now I have something to sort of cast shadows on. So let's do another render here. And you can see here we've got the ability to cast shadows now, right? What will help with the resolution here is upping it, right? So we're going to click on the render settings here. And in here, we're going to change this from 540, which is a 960 by 540, to 2048, right, by 1024. All right. So what I'm looking for is 10 renders at that ability, the 248 by 1024. In the Arnold renderer, you can see here we have the sampling as the default. We could increase the sampling a little bit. We could make the diffuse, say, at 3, and just increase that a little bit, or 4 or something like that, and that would increase the resolution. But to be honest, at this resolution, it's going to be quite an improvement just by upping the resolution here. In fact, let me go ahead and render it, and we'll take a quick look here and see the difference. So it is going to take a little bit longer to render, but you'll notice that the objects will be a lot smoother. The shadows will be smoother. Everything will just look pretty good. It's amazing how just increasing the size of the resolution will really help out without finessing anything else. Especially for these renders, I'm not looking for super high quality renders. If we go much higher in the resolution, it's going to take a long time to render out the frames. And I want you guys to just kind of get the basics of the idea. But if I zoom on it, it's not bad. The textures, the shadows look pretty decent, right? And a lot of that has to do with the sampling of the lighting. So just to refer back to that, if I select the area light here and go to my settings here, I have 22 for exposure. And again, it's way out here. So you can see how far out it is from my scene. Here's my little scene here. Here's my light. And it's the samples here, the 3. That really improves the resolution of that shadow here and creates a nice little shadow. So again, you want 100 or more of these cool objects rendered out in 10 different renders. And to save them out, again, you go File, Save Image. And you can give it a name. So I'll just call this P1 for Pottery 1. And then again, you can choose the color managed image or the raw image. So remember that. And if I want, most of these are probably going to want the color managed because it'll show you what it looks like on the screen here. And then you want it to save as a JPEG. So make sure you click in here and go to JPEG and then click Save. Now, if you don't see JPEG in there, you can click in here in your render settings. Again, you can click on the gear icon to open that up. And then scroll down until you get to, actually it's sort of on the up part, the file format, the image format. You can use the standard EXR, but you can go in here and switch to JPEG. And then JPEG should show up in your save image option in here. And that'll be fine. So I will save out one as a raw image just to show the difference again. And I'll call this P2 and then hit save. And then what you're going to upload is your actual images. So I'm going to go to Documents, Maya, Projects, Pottery Project, the Images folder. And in here you can see a the nicer one, and then here's the one that's not color managed. Here's one with more objects on here with a texture on the background. Again, it doesn't have 100 yet. I have more to work on this, but just to give you an idea, this is what it would look like in the end. So that's sort of it for the pottery project. Hope you have lots of fun doing this and have fun exploring the possibilities of using curves to create using the Revolve tool. It's lots of fun. And then add your materials and textures and lighting. Until next time, see you soon. Cheers.